I'm Chef Richard Miller. Welcome to Chef Richard's Kitchen today. Everybody likes what we used to eat at home when we were kids, comfort foods. We all like them. I remember some of the things that I ate when I was a kid that my parents served me when I was young, that I remember those, but I don't remember things, even good foods after that. We all tend to go back and love comfort foods. And we've done one comfort food on this channel already. We did meatloaf, and that went over big. Lots of people like that. Today we're going to do another one. We're going to do Swiss steak. And it's one of them that I'm sure it comes back to good and reasonably inexpensive. When I had it, money was not an extravagance at our home. But she always made very good meals. And what was it? Just the good old comfort foods. And today I'm going to share one of those with you. We're going to do Swiss steak, and like any other recipe, there's probably 100 different recipes out there that you could easily find that are quite different from each other. Well, this is one of the ways I remember them, and this is the way I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show it. So let's go ahead and start out here with our meat. And really, what am I using? Well, this is just bottom round. It's not an expensive cutted meat at all. In fact, you have to cook and cook and cook it, to make it come out tender. And even more so, as you see, I've taken a meat tenderizer to it. And what's my meat tenderizer? I have a real high-tech one here. Just this. Just a hammer with teeth on one side of it. What do we call them? A BFH, a big fat hammer. Well, something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started here. I'm going to start out with a half a cup of flour. Just regular all-purpose flour, will do fine. A teaspoon of smoked paprika. A teaspoon of garlic powder. Some kosher salt. And pepper. All right. Now let's mix this together. And we're going to dredge our steaks. Now, a lot of times when you see people dredging these steaks, what they're doing is they, put them in the flour, then put them in the egg batter, then back in the flour again. We're not frying these, so I'm not going to all the trouble to do that. Really, all we're doing is we're going to take and we're going to brown these. And what the flour is being used for is to create a nice brown crust on them, or brown them nicely. Once we've got that done, if we have any flour left over, what we're going to do is we're going to take the steaks out and we're going to make a roux. And then we're going to go ahead and saute our carrots, our onion, and our mushrooms on that. And then when we put in our tomatoes and our beef stock, it'll have a thickening agent already in there. So let's go ahead and get started. We're just simply going to dredge our steaks like this. That's it. I cut them up in pieces, probably about 6 by 4, and probably about 18 square inches, something like that. And that's probably about 6 ounces, a serving, which is what we want. All right, now we've gone ahead, we've dredged our steaks. Let me go over and we're going to take and we're going to brown them. We're going to brown them in my Dutch oven, and that's what we're going to then eventually bake them in as that. So we'll go over to the stove. And I'm going to let the Dutch oven heat up for probably a couple of minutes. So I'll go ahead and I'll cut the tape at this point. You don't need to wait for that, but don't go far. All right, the Dutch oven's probably getting warm enough. Let's go ahead and let's start browning our steaks. Going to go ahead and we're going to put them in the Dutch oven like this. And the big thing to remember here is we don't want to put them in and cramp them. We don't want to steam them, we want to brown them. So we put them in the Dutch oven like this, and we're going to go ahead and let them brown on each side, probably about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that. Since I have 6 steaks and I'm doing 3 at a time, we'll just do it in 2 separate batches. That way we'll know we'll get a good brown on them, and that'll give us a very, very good flavor when we're done. All right, it's been about 4 minutes, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip these over. As you can see, right now they're getting a nice brown on them, and that's exactly what we want. Now we'll let them go for another couple of minutes. And look at all this nice, you probably can't see it from the camera, but there are brown bits which we call fond down in the bottom there. And those are going to give it a lot of extra flavor when we finally put in a liquid and we deglaze the bottom of the pan. All right. Now at this point here, if you've been getting a little dry, don't worry about that. Just simply put in a little more oil. Backwise. Okay, we're getting our brown on the one side of our second batch. So we're going to turn them over, and we're going to brown the final side. Okay, backwise. All right, we've got both sides of the second batch nicely browned. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the Dutch oven, and if you can see down there all those brown bits in there, that's the fond that I was talking about. And those have a lot of flavor down in there, and unless they're burnt. Now if they're burnt, you don't use them. Otherwise, feel free. It's delicious. It's all sorts of good stuff down in there. And right now I'm adding a little bit of this flour and a little more oil. Now this is also the same type of roux that you make when you're starting gravy, to make sure you have all the nice natural goodnesses, to make sure you all have the same natural goodness that comes out of your meat. All right. Now, let's go ahead and let's put in our onions and our carrots. I'm going to let these saute for just a couple of minutes. Let them brown up and caramelize a bit. And then I'm going to put a little beef broth in here. And we'll go ahead and we'll let them finish cooking until, well, slightly tender, but mostly till the onions are starting to get translucent. Then I'm going to put our mushrooms in here, and we're going to let them cook down just a little bit too. Okay, there's our beef broth. And I'm putting in about six ounces of mushrooms. And we'll just go ahead and we're going to let this kind of saute for about 3 to 4 minutes. And once again, no sense in letting you guys sit there, doing nothing while you watch me do that. So go ahead, have a little break. Don't go far. We'll be right back. I'm putting the rest of my beef stock in there. I probably put, 10 to 12 ounces. And what's your typical can? It's about 12 ounces, so yeah, probably about a can's worth of beef broth. You look down in here, and the sauce is thickening nicely. Just breaking up the onions just a tad. Give it just a little while longer, and then it'll be time to put on our tomato base. All right, here we are now. We're getting ready to put in our tomato base, and what I want to do is I don't want to have it too chunky I've got mushrooms in there, I have onion pieces in there, I have carrots, but I don't want it too liquidy either, so what I'm going to do is I'm putting in one 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes, and I'll put in probably about half of the diced tomatoes here, and we'll kind of see where we are at that point. If it looks like, we could use a little bit more, we'll go ahead and put the rest in. The first thing I'm putting in is my 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Next, I put in about half my can of diced tomatoes. And let's give this a nice stir. Now, I've gone ahead and I've preheated the oven to 350 degrees. So when we put our steaks back in here, we're going to put the lid on, put them in the oven, and we're going to let them sit for about 2 hours. And after 2 hours, we'll check them again, and at that point, it'll be ready to start our side dishes. Remember what I always tell you to do. Make sure that you taste what you're fixing, and you don't want to give your guests anything that you don't like and you wouldn't love yourself. Very good. Now let's go ahead and let's put our Worcestershire sauce in. We'll put some more kosher salt in. And we'll put some more black pepper in. Stir this all together. Now let's taste it again. That makes a world of difference. Just putting in that much seasoning makes quite a bit of difference. Now, here's a trick you can use. If you just want a little extra brightness to it, you don't want heat, but you want a little extra brightness to it, put in a pinch of cayenne pepper. Not a teaspoonful or anything like that. Just put in a little pinch. You'll be amazed how much it just brightens up the flavors on these. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. There's just a pinch of cayenne pepper. Alright, now when we have our sauce is boiling, it's time to put in the meat. Now, not all of it's going to submerge, but we'll put as much as we can underneath. There, we actually did get it all underneath. Now remember, the meat juices here, that's a lot of extra flavor. So we don't want that to go to waste either. So put that in. All right. Now that we have everything in, let's go ahead and put this in the oven. We put that in the oven at 300. I know I'm not going to make you wait for all this because it's going to be about an hour and a half or 2 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the tape here, but don't worry, we'll be back. Okay, welcome back. It's been about an hour and a half, and the Swiss steak is doing well in there. And let's go ahead and let's start making our sides at this point. And remember, I was going to make mashed potatoes, which goes excellent with Swiss steak, and I was also going to make some green beans that also go equally well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to cut up some potatoes. And I'm not going to finely dice them or anything like that. In fact, it's kind of a rough dice, maybe an inch, inch and a half, something like that. All right, but this will be fine when we put it in the water and we boil it so we can cook the potatoes. All right, now as the water boils, I'm going to put the potatoes in there and I'm going to set the timer for about 20 minutes. And we need another couple of minutes before it really boils. But we don't want to put it in too early. We don't want to put the potatoes in too early because they're going to drop the temperature of the water. Let's get it hot enough that it's boiled, then we can put it. I left the oven at about 350 degrees for the first hour. After that, I went down and I turned it down to 300, which is what I want to do a low and slow type cooking with. Go long and slow. And so what I'm doing now is, when you see over there at the temperature gauge, you're going to see 300. Well, that's the reason. I started out at 350 to make sure that it was hot and going, left it there for an hour, and then went down to 300. So that's where we're going to finish it off. But we're going to have to right now do the potatoes and the beans first. Okay, our water's starting to boil now. We're boiling at a good clip. So let's go ahead and let's add our potatoes. All right, we can see that the potatoes itself, we cooled the water down enough that it's going to take a little reaction time before that boils again. But I'm going to set the timer on about 20 minutes to start. And after that, we're going to poke a fork in them and we're going to see if they're done. So let's go ahead and put the lid on. Okay, we've got about 4 minutes left on the potatoes. So let's go ahead and start working with our green beans. And really, all I want to do is I want to take and I want to chop the ends off. Then we're going put them in their own pot of water. And really what we're going to do is I don't want to say blanch, because blanch isn't cooking, but it isn't much more than that, because we don't want them, to get too tender and mushy. We want the beans to remain a little bit firm, at least al dente. All right, so here's our beans. As soon as the potatoes are done and mashed, we'll go ahead and put the beans in, and they're just going to be in for a minute or so. It doesn't take. Okay, the timer's gone off and it's been 20 minutes. So let's go ahead and let's check our potatoes. When we check our potatoes, we just go ahead and put a fork in them. If the fork goes in easily, they're done. And in this case, yes, they are. So let's go ahead, and I have a colander over here that I'm going to go ahead and drain them into. Okay. Once they're drained, now it's time that we mash them. And I did have one person write to me and ask me what kind of high-tech equipment that I use and what do I prefer. And my answer to that is really I don't use a lot of high-tech. For my can opener, I use this. For my potato masher, I essentially use this. And I found that just works as well as anything else. Now, some people do use a hand mixer for their potatoes. But in this case, I'm just going to use. So let's start out and just mash a little. Now it's going to take a while before these are really going to be smooth. And that's all right. But what we want to do is I want to take and I want to add some butter. Now one thing I recommend is most of the time when you go to the supermarket or the grocery store, everything is salted butter. I really want to recommend getting unsalted butter. And the reason for that is everything else has quite a bit of salt in it already. What you want to do is you want to minimize that, and remember, you want to be careful of people on low sodium diets. Don't oversalt it, and then let the people, on the table salt it if they want more. Here we've added a little butter, and I use butter, not margarine, and some warm milk. I use butter, not margarine. When I was a kid, butter was evil, and everything was going to the vegetable oil. And what they found with margarine, because it's vegetable oil, but it's hydrogenated to make sure that it's in a solid form, they found it was actually worse for you than butter. So anymore, I simply use butter. Now I do try and use, if it's a slightly lighter butter, yeah, I try and use that. But other than that, butter's just fine. All right, here we have our potatoes. Now it's time. And it's just, I'm going to put these in the water, and I'm just going to let them cook until they're pretty much al dente or a little bit beyond, or maybe a little bit beyond. Just about done. So let me go ahead, and I want to take out the Swiss steak. If we look at that, wow, it's a very good consistency. So at this time, I think we're ready to plate. The first thing we want to do is we want to put our potatoes down. And the reason is we want to put our steak on the potatoes. All right? The next thing we want to do is we want to pour just a little sauce around the edges. We want to take one of our steaks, put that on the potatoes, take a few green beans, and put them on the plate. Now if you want, put a little extra salt in there. I will put a little salt on the beans. If you want to put salt and pepper into the potatoes, and I don't, I usually let people salt them for themselves, you can use white pepper. And what white pepper does is it simply ground white peppercorns. And it keeps your potatoes from looking like it has little black dots in it. So if you're going to salt potatoes, use the white. All right. Put a little garnish on there, and here we go. Now the last thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that it's good enough for our guests as we want to taste it. Delicious. I'd be happy to serve that to a guest anytime. Anyway, now we've made Swiss steak together. Please give it a try. It's really easy. It's extremely inexpensive to make, and it's a lot of fun. Now, go out and try it. In the meantime, take care. God bless. Remember, for heaven's sakes, my prime directive, cooking should always be fun. And thanks again for watching. We'll see you next episode.